Racing games are awesome, and we all love them. Some are even cherished for a long time. But the sad reality is that some of these games are on the verge of vanishing in the near future. And that's because of two particularly unfortunate situations. What those situations are and how bad the future really looks like is coming up now. And with that, welcome back to Overtake. In recent times, I have thought about all the racing games I have played in the past 3 years. On the one hand, because there were some absolute beauties in there and I enjoyed them very much, but also because I wanted to know if the thought of losing them would make me feel uncomfortable. And it did. The reason for this unforeseen yander into my subconsciousness was a post on Reddit, which was about GT Sport. As confirmed by Sony, the servers for GT Sport will be shut down on January the 31st. This in itself is pretty common, as companies don't and can't pay for server capacity forever. The holdup, however, lies within the nature of the game. You see, GT Sport, just like most racing games and most games in general nowadays, have an effective need for online play. It won't prevent you from starting the game, but will not let you progress through the title anymore, which in turn renders GT Sport useless and functionally dead. This did anger a lot of commenters in the thread, calling for a patch or some sort of revamped service structure to play the game beyond the point of online features being disabled. One even said that Overtake is the best sim racing channel in all of YouTube. Yes, really. Here it is. If you want to make sure that that is correct, then hitting the like button, subscribing, and tapping on that bell is an absolute must. But back to our problem at hand. Now, before we go deeper into this topic, I can already hear the clicking of your keyboards. I know GT7 is out and features much of everything GT Sport offered, but that is beside the point, because what happened to GT Sport will happen to GT7 and did already get announced for another giant of the racing game universe. The Crew 1 will be virtually defunct by the 31st of March 2024. And that is arguably the bigger crime of the both. Because unlike GT Sport, which has a clear predecessor with like 95% of the content in it, the Crew 1 did share some distinction to its younger siblings. Seeing this absolute clinic of an open world racer disappear is disheartening for me. The game is widely regarded as a leeway into the current era of open world racing games, with a crazy big map and a unique concept that was a joy to play at first. I vividly remember visiting my first Gamescom back in 2013 and playtesting the Crew. Seeing it go out like that is sad. But why is this the fate so many awesome titles meet? And what does it say for the future? First off, as I said, the shutdown of server capacity for older games is common practice. If we are all very honest here, not a whole bunch of us swung on their PS4 to grind some GT Sport after the release of the 7th title of the series. However, the problem lies in the way these games are made nowadays. Because for some reason, game devs kept changing the core of the titles until literally saving the game or buying a car is considered an online feature. The official explanation as to why Gran Turismo is always online comes from the game's creator, Kazunori Yamauchi, and is that it is done to prevent cheating. With online saving enabled, the modification of saved data is very hard, or at least harder to do. As far as I am concerned, there are also other reasons. One, to complement the pay-to-play online structure of consoles, and two, to further the agenda to have a digital world where you are connected to everyone and anyone. This way, more lucrative micropayments can be implemented in the future, as evidenced in the transformation racing games made in the past decade. This also means, however, that you put these titles on a timer which ticks with immense precision and keeps players on their heels as far as progression goes. I mean, I won't sit here and say you better play GT7 until it's too late, but one thing worries me about the situation a lot. The Crew 1 at least is 10 years old, but GT Sport barely made it past 6. If we keep decreasing the lifespan of racing games, its player base will notice that. Even though something new is always out to be played, another part of the problem needs to be mentioned. Digital archiving is a term many use to describe the preservation of gaming culture. You cannot buy new Super Nintendo games in most stores, because they're not getting produced anymore. Probably a good thing, since they will never be sold at the same volume as a brand new Need for Speed, for example. But you don't want to see them vanish from the collective mind either. That's why you keep their copies around and secondhand markets exist. You can buy a used console and get the games from platforms like eBay. Now, in the past 10 to 15 years, this problem was tackled. It has become way easier to just buy games digitally, which means you own a copy of the game on your machine. I don't physically own a lot of my games either anymore. This way, they can't break or end up lost, and theoretically are there as long as the platform is supported. But it also means that you are at the mercy of first-hand distributors to have them available to you at all time. And that's where the second problem comes in. Digital archiving is a very important thing in my eyes. When a lot less copies are getting produced physically, you need some form of compensation for it in the long term. However, one thing stands in that way: licensing. It is probably not a big surprise to you that racing games which feature real cars in their games have to tie legally binding contracts with manufacturers that include stuff like money, specifications like technical data, and most importantly, the length of its intended use. In reality, this means that games have the right to cars and brands for only a certain amount of time, usually 5 to 7 years. Within this period of time, the game is able to be sold, as the license is ongoing. Afterwards, it has to be taken out of store. You can still own them without the fear of SWAT showing up at your door, but if you want to find a hard copy for those games, you better have your sources. In the days of GameStop shopping sprees, this really didn't bother most people, since very few of them would buy the hot stuff from 5 years ago firsthand. But as we already mentioned, times have changed. The amount of hard copies is less than ever. This is evidenced by data like this, where it shows that 82% of some of the most selling titles of 2023 were bought digitally. Thus, delisting from platforms hurts a lot, since the secondhand market is virtually gone at this point as well. You can see that with titles like Project Cars 1 and 2, as well as older Forza games. These games were already delisted from their respective sales platforms, alongside games like Colin McRae, the Dirt games, and every F1 title before F1 2022. Those titles are now onto the last contingent of keys left at key seller websites. While the demand for them is not astronomical, it effectively means that there is a finite amount of them out there, when in theory, everything is able to be digitally produced and stored. Furthermore, you may also see why games like GTA or Burnout Paradise opted out of using officially licensed rides. This way, they are able to have their perfectly realistic lookalikes in there forever without paying anything to the manufacturers. Is that the best situation there is? Probably not. We enjoy seeing something we know from real life in our games, and being able to drive a real hypercar, or at least its sprite, is much cooler and immersive if the name mirrors that of a real-world manufacturer. However, cars aren't the only licensed product in racing games. In the past, Need for Speed, for example, had lots of licensed music and brands as well. They all get similar deals to the manufacturers, which means after a certain time, these deals run out as well. It is all a big misery. In the future, this leaves a grim view for people who are into retro games or just like to play titles longer than they are hot. The trend seems to shift towards an ever shorter lifespan, which will eventually transform the way these game devs sign license agreements. When the number suggests that players move on more quickly than ever nowadays, doesn't it logically follow to shut down servers sooner? Or have licenses run only 3 years or even less? And if that's the case, then the inner Jack Sparrow may find a way to surface. Of course, I can't endorse piracy here, but the current trend of making everything online dependent and having games vanish after a certain amount of years will be the catalyst for it. And to be honest, they do more for digital preservation than developers do, which is a shame. A scandal, one could even call it. If you want to see which scandals 2023 included in the sim racing space, then clicking on this video right here will help you out with that. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, cheerio.